My husband passed away, and my daughter inherited the house and $6 million. All I got was an old cabin. Then she threw me out of the house, screaming, "Go live with the pigs, you poor old woman." Days later, what I found in that cabin left her in shock. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment which city you're watching from. That way I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Joyce, and I'm 56 years old. For 30 years, I thought I knew my family. I thought love and loyalty meant something. Until the day my husband died, and I discovered just how wrong I had been. The reading of the will was in the office of Mr. Morrison, an older lawyer with glasses that slid down his nose as he read the documents. I was sitting in a worn leather chair, my hands clasped in my lap, trying to control my nerves. My daughter Amanda was beside me, dressed in an expensive black suit I didn't remember seeing her wear before. Her posture was stiff, expectant. "All right," Mr. Morrison began, clearing his throat. "I will now proceed with the reading of Robert Matthews's last wishes." My heart was pounding. Robert and I had been married for 25 years. We had worked together to build a life, a home, a future. Naturally, I assumed everything would be split evenly, or maybe the larger share would go to me, considering Amanda already had a successful career as a lawyer. "To my dear wife, Joyce," Morrison read, and I sat up straighter. "I leave the cabin on Pine Creek Road along with all its contents." I frowned. The cabin was an old, dilapidated structure Robert had inherited from his father years ago. We had never done anything with it because it needed too much work. "To my beloved daughter Amanda," Morrison continued, "I leave the family home on Maple Street, all bank accounts, investments, and the total sum of $6 million. The world stopped. $6 million. The house where I had lived for 25 years. Everything we had built together. Amanda had gotten everything, and I had gotten a cabin that was falling apart. There must be a mistake, I muttered, my voice barely a whisper. Amanda turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There's no mistake, Mom. Dad knew what he was doing." Mr. Morrison looked at me with something resembling pity. "The terms are very clear, Mrs. Matthews. Your husband was very specific about his wishes." We left the office in silence. The April sun felt too bright, almost cruel. During the ride back home, Amanda didn't say a word, but I could feel her satisfaction radiating from her like heat from an oven. That night, as I was preparing dinner, like I had for decades, Amanda finally spoke. "Mom, we need to talk about the living arrangements." I put the knife down on the cutting board. "What arrangements?" "Well, this is my house now, and frankly, I think it's time for you to have your own space." I stared at her, waiting for any sign that she was joking. "Amanda, this has been my home for 25 years. This is where I built my life with your father." "Dad's not here anymore," she said coldly. "And this house is mine now. You have the cabin." "The cabin has no electricity, Amanda, no running water. The roof is caving in." She shrugged as if my problems were trivial. "Then you'll have to fix it, won't you? Look, I don't want this to get unpleasant. I'm giving you 1 week to pack your things." I felt like I had been slapped. 1 week. 1 week, she repeated, and then added with an icy smile. "Consider this an opportunity for independence, Mom. You always said you wanted more time for yourself." The next few days were a whirlwind of confusion and pain. I packed my personal belongings, the family photos, the clothes that fit into 2 suitcases. Amanda supervised everything like a hawk, making sure I didn't take anything she considered valuable. "Not that," she told me when I tried to take the china set my mother had given me. "That came with the house. It was my mother's Amanda, and now it's part of my inheritance." On the last day, as I loaded my suitcases into my old Honda, Amanda came out of the house. She was wearing a new designer dress and jewelry I didn't recognize. "I hope you understand this isn't personal, Mom," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. Dad obviously had his reasons for doing this. "And what do you think those reasons were?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Amanda stepped closer, and for a moment I thought that maybe finally she would show some compassion. Instead, her expression hardened. "Maybe he finally realized you were always a burden, always depending on him, never really contributing. Maybe he wanted to make sure that I, who actually made something of my life, got what I deserved." Her words hit me like bullets. Amanda, I sacrificed my career to raise you. I left my job to be a homemaker because you and your father wanted it that way. No one forced you to do anything, Mom. Those were your choices. I got into the car with trembling hands. Amanda stood in the driveway watching me drive away from the only home I had known as an adult. When I arrived at the cabin, the sun was setting. The structure looked even worse than I remembered. The paint was peeling, there were broken windows, and the porch steps sagged dangerously. But it was all I had. That first night, lying on the floor on an old blanket staring at the stars through a hole in the roof, I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not just for the loss of my home, but for the loss of the daughter I thought I knew. How had it come to this? How had the little girl I had raised, who I had loved unconditionally, turned into someone so cruel? But as the tears dried on my cheeks and the silent woods surrounded me, a small spark of something ignited in my chest. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was determination. If Amanda thought I would give up, if she thought I would break, she was dead wrong. She had no idea what was waiting for me in that old, seemingly useless cabin. She had no idea that my life was about to change forever. The first few days in the cabin were the hardest of my life. With no electricity, I relied on candles and an old flashlight I found in a dusty drawer. Without running water, I had to walk half a mile to a well that still worked, carrying buckets that felt heavier each day. My hands, once accustomed to the comfort of a suburban life, were now covered in blisters and cuts. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional toll. On the third day, my sister Linda called. Her voice sounded strange, distant. "Joyce, is it true what Amanda is saying?" "What is she saying?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. "She says you attacked the lawyer when the will was read. That you screamed and made a scene because they didn't leave you all the money." The phone felt heavy in my hand. "Linda, that's completely false. I would never..." "She also says you've been harassing her, demanding money, threatening to hire a lawyer to contest the will." "That's a lie." My voice broke. "Linda, I'm your sister. You know me better than that." There was a long, painful pause. "I don't know what to think, Joyce. Amanda seemed very upset when she called. She said she was afraid of you." After I hung up, I sat on the rotten wood floor of the cabin and cried until I had no tears left. Amanda hadn't just taken my home, she was systematically destroying all my other relationships. The next day, my sister-in-law Margaret canceled our traditional Friday lunch. "I think it's best if you take some time for yourself, Joyce, to reflect on things." Then it was my cousin Sarah, who had been like a sister to me. "Amanda says you've been drinking a lot since Robert died. Maybe you should get help." Every phone call was a stab in the back. Amanda had carefully built a narrative where I was the villain, the greedy and desperate widow who couldn't accept that her own husband didn't trust her with his fortune. A week after I moved into the cabin, Amanda showed up at my door. She arrived in a brand new bright red BMW, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my car. "Hi, Mom," she said with a fake smile. "Just came to see how you're settling in." I looked at her through the broken screen door, trying to process her presence. "What do you want, Amanda? Can't I visit my own mother?" She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Wow, this place really is a dump, isn't it? Look at those broken windows and that roof." "My God, are you really living here?" "I have no choice." "Well, I guess you'll just have to make it work." She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You know, Mom, I've been talking to the family about you." My stomach sank. "What have you been telling them? Just the truth, that you've been very bitter since the will reading, that you can't accept Dad's decisions, that you've been making some very nasty comments about me." "Amanda, that's not true and you know it." She shrugged. "Perception is reality, Mom, and the perception is that you're not handling your grief well." Then she turned and started walking back to her car, but stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "Oh, and Mom, Linda mentioned you might try to contest the will. Just so you know, Dad worked with the best lawyer in the state. Everything is legally airtight. If you try anything, you'll just end up with even less money than you have." After she left, I stood in that broken doorway for a long time, watching her car disappear down the dirt path. The reality of my situation hit me like an avalanche. I had not only lost my home and my family, but Amanda had systematically destroyed my reputation. That night, as I tried to patch one of the broken windows with duct tape and cardboard, I reflected on the last 25 years. Had I really been such a bad mother, such a bad wife? I remembered when Amanda was 8 and got sick with pneumonia. I had spent 3 straight nights at the hospital sleeping in an uncomfortable chair holding her hand. I remembered all the school plays I attended, all the science projects I helped with, all the nights I stayed up waiting for her to come home as a teenager. I remembered when Robert lost his job in 1998 and I went back to work as a secretary to keep the family afloat. I remembered how I left that job when he found a better one because he said it was important for someone to be home for Amanda. Had those things meant anything to him? Had they meant anything to Amanda? Apparently not. 2 weeks after I moved in, my closest neighbor, Mr. Henderson, came to visit. He was an older man who had known Robert for years. "Joyce," he said, taking off his cap, "I'm so sorry about Robert, and I'm even sorrier about what's happening to you." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson." "I've lived here for 40 years, he continued, "and I know the value of this land. Your husband was a smart man, a very smart man." I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but his words stayed with me. By the end of my second month in the cabin, I had lost 15 pounds. My hands were calloused and rough. My hair had lost its shine, and new lines had appeared around my eyes. But there was something else. There was a hardness in my gaze that hadn't been there before. One morning, while sweeping debris off the porch, I found a strange key partially buried under some loose floorboards. It was unlike any key I had seen before, heavy and intricately designed. I held it up to the sunlight, turning it over in my fingers. What door did this key open? In a cabin where I thought I knew every corner, I had found something completely new. That night, as the candles flickered around me and the woods rustled outside, I examined the key more closely. It had small engraved symbols I couldn't decipher, and something told me this was no ordinary key. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair or sadness. It was curiosity. And beneath that curiosity was something more dangerous. Hope. I didn't know then that this small brass key was going to change everything. I didn't know that my life of exile was about to transform into something completely different, something that would give Amanda a surprise she never saw coming. My obsession with the key consumed me for days. I carried it in my pocket as I went about the daily tasks of survival, gathering firewood, fetching water, trying to patch the leaks in the roof. Every night by candlelight, I examined it, trying to decipher its purpose. The engraved symbols looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen them before. They were tiny, delicate, as if made by an expert craftsman. The key itself was heavy, made of a metal that didn't seem like ordinary brass. On the 4th day after finding it, I decided to inspect the cabin more systematically. For the months I had been living there, I had been too busy just trying to survive to really explore. Now, with the key as my motivation, I began to search for any lock compartment or hiding place that might match. I started in the basement, a damp, spiderweb-filled space I had avoided until now. Armed with my flashlight and renewed determination, I went down the wooden stairs that creaked ominously under my weight. The basement was larger than I expected, stretching under the entire structure of the cabin. The walls were unpolished stone, and the floor was packed earth. In one corner, there was a pile of old dusty boxes. In another, rusty tools hung from hooks on the wall. That's when I saw it, a small metal door set into the back wall, almost hidden behind an old shelving unit. My heart started beating faster as I approached. The door had a small, ornate lock with the same engraved symbols I had seen on the key. With trembling hands, I took the key from my pocket and inserted it into the lock. It fit perfectly. The mechanism turned with a soft click, despite the years it had probably been sealed. The door swung open to reveal a small space like a safe built into the wall. Inside, there was a thick manila envelope and a smaller metal box. I carefully took both items and went back upstairs, my heart pounding with a mix of expectation and fear. Once upstairs in the best light I could manage, I opened the envelope first. It contained legal documents that I didn't understand at first, property deeds, topographical maps, and papers with official state seals. But as I read more carefully using a magnifying glass, I found in one of the drawers, I began to understand what I held in my hands. They were mineral rights, mining rights for the entire property where the cabin was located. And not just for the small plot I could see, but for 200 acres of forest that stretched into the hills. My breath quickened as I read the documents. According to the papers, which dated back to the 1920s, Robert's family had owned the mineral rights to this land for generations. But more importantly, there was a recent geological report dated just 2 years before Robert's death. The report indicated significant deposits of high-quality quartz, as well as potential veins of semi-precious stones. But what left me breathless was the last page, a purchase offer from a mining company for the extraction rights, $5 million. The offer had been made 6 months before Robert died, but according to a handwritten note in the margin, he had rejected it. "I'll wait for the right time," he had written in his familiar handwriting. With hands that were shaking violently, I opened the smaller metal box. Inside was a sealed letter with my name written in Robert's hand. "My dearest Joyce," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means you have found what I left for you. I hope Amanda wasn't too cruel, but knowing her nature, she probably was. I had to stop reading to wipe away the tears that had started to fall on the paper. I know you must be wondering why I did things this way," the letter continued. "Why I gave the house and the money to Amanda while leaving you this cabin that seems worthless. The answer is simple. I know you, Joyce. I know your strength, your resilience, your ability to survive and thrive, even in the most difficult circumstances. Amanda never had to fight for anything. We gave her everything on a silver platter, and I'm afraid it turned her into someone I don't recognize. Someone greedy, manipulative, with no real compassion for others. If I had left everything to you directly, she would have found a way to take it from you legally or otherwise." My breathing was ragged as I kept reading. "But you, my love, you have something Amanda will never have. True inner strength. I knew that if anyone could survive in that cabin long enough to find this treasure, it would be you. Consider it a final test one that Amanda would have never passed. The mineral rights to this property are worth far more than the house and the money I left Amanda. But more than that, they are your freedom, your independence, your chance to live the rest of your life on your own terms without depending on anyone. There are more documents in the bank safe in a safety deposit box registered under your name. The box number is on the back of this letter. Use it wisely. I loved you through all our years together, Joyce. I'm sorry I put you through this ordeal, but I knew you were strong enough to overcome it. Now live. Live for both of us." At the end of the letter was a number 247. I sat on the cabin floor for a long time reading and rereading the letter. Robert had orchestrated all of this. The will that seemed so cruel, so unfair, had actually been his way of protecting me from Amanda, while also giving me something she could never touch. But there was something else in his words that made me feel a mix of love and pain. He had known me well enough to know I would survive this test, but he had also known Amanda well enough to know she would betray me. How long had he known our daughter was capable of such cruelty? When had he seen the person she had become that night for the first time in months? I didn't feel desperate. I didn't feel abandoned or betrayed. I felt something I had forgotten how to feel. Powerful. Amanda thought she had destroyed me. She thought she had won. That she had finally gotten rid of the mother she considered a burden, but she had no idea what she had really inherited. She had no idea that her cruelty had been exactly the test Robert expected her to fail. The next day I drove to the bank in town. Safety Deposit Box 247 contained even more documents, including updated geological reports and correspondence with 3 different mining companies, all interested in the extraction rights. The most recent offer, dated 1 week before Robert's death, was for $7 million. As I drove back to the cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about Amanda, probably in the house that used to be mine, spending the money she thought was her great victory. She didn't know that her mother, the woman she had treated like trash, had just become a millionaire. But it wasn't time for the reveal yet. First, I had to decide exactly how I wanted to use this new power. One thing was certain. Amanda had gravely underestimated the woman who had raised her. The following days were a whirlwind of quiet investigation. I had decided not to do anything rash. Robert had been meticulous in his planning, and I would be just as careful in my execution. First, I contacted a different lawyer, one in the next town, who didn't know Amanda. Mr. Peterson was an older man who specialized in mineral rights and land transactions. When I showed him the documents, his eyes lit up with professional interest. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, adjusting his glasses to get a better look at the papers, "this is extraordinary. Your husband had impeccable documentation here. These mineral rights are legitimate and completely separate from any other inheritance." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that even though your daughter inherited the house and the money, these mineral rights are completely independent. They are specifically in your name and cannot be contested or claimed by anyone else." I felt a wave of relief. "And the offers from the mining companies," Peterson smiled. "Very legitimate. In fact, I know 2 of these companies. They have excellent reputations. But Mrs. Matthews, before you make any decision, I recommend you get an independent geological assessment. The prices for semi-precious stones have risen significantly in recent years." Following his advice, I hired an independent geologist to do his own evaluation of the property. Dr. Martin Reeves was a man in his 50s with a gray beard and eyes that shone with enthusiasm when he talked about rocks and minerals. For 3 days, I watched him walk my property with strange equipment, taking samples, making measurements. I continued with my daily routine, maintaining the facade of the abandoned woman struggling to survive in a ruined cabin. Meanwhile, I started to watch Amanda's behavior more closely. It wasn't hard to get information about her in a small town. People talked, especially at the post office and the grocery store. What I heard surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. "That Amanda Matthews is spending money like it's going out of style," Mrs. Gonzalez muttered in the grocery store line. "She bought 3 new cars in the last month." "3! And that trip to Europe she's planning," her friend added. 2 months in the best hotels that must be costing a fortune. "My niece works at the jewelry store downtown," Mrs. Gonzalez continued. "She says Amanda has been in there 4 times buying necklaces and bracelets that cost more than my annual salary." I listened to these conversations with growing fascination. Amanda was doing exactly what Robert had predicted, squandering the money without any thought for the future. A week later, Dr. Reeves handed me his report. His smile was even wider than before. "Mrs. Matthews, your property is a literal treasure. The quartz deposits are extensive and high quality, but that's not the most exciting part." "What else did you find?" "Amethyst. A lot of gem-quality amethyst. And something even better, green tourmaline. The specimens I found suggest significant deposits." I didn't know much about precious stones, but Dr. Reeves's expression told me this was good. Very good. "What kind of value are we talking about?" I asked. "Conservatively, I'd say the extraction rights could be worth between $10 and $15 million, possibly more if the tourmaline deposits are as extensive as I suspect. $15 million, 3 times what Amanda had inherited. And that was a conservative estimate. That night, as I ate my simple dinner by candlelight, I couldn't help but smile. Robert had known exactly what he was doing. He had turned my apparent humiliation into the greatest victory of my life. But my investigation didn't stop there. I started paying closer attention to Amanda's activities, not out of spite, but out of strategic curiosity. One afternoon, while I was at the bank making some minor transactions, I overheard a very interesting conversation. Amanda was at the window next to mine, and her voice was loud enough that it was impossible not to hear. "I need to transfer another $50,000 to my investment account," she was telling the teller. "And I also need information about loans against my inheritance. I have some major expenses coming up." Loans against her inheritance. That meant she was already spending more money than she had readily available. After she left, I waited a few minutes before approaching the same teller. He was young, probably new to the job, and seemed a bit overwhelmed. "Excuse me," I said in my most motherly voice, "but isn't the woman who just left Amanda Matthews? I think she might be a relative of mine." "Oh yes, Mrs. Matthews has been very busy lately with all her transactions. Transactions? Well, I shouldn't talk about other customers' business, he said, but then he leaned forward as if to share a juicy piece of gossip. But between you and me, I've never seen anyone spend money so fast. Large withdrawals almost every day. This was valuable information. Amanda wasn't just spending Robert's money, she was spending it at an unsustainable rate. A few nights later, as I was reviewing Robert's documents for the umpteenth time, I found something I had overlooked before. A small note written in the margin of one of the older geological reports. Amanda never had patience for the things that really matter. She always wanted instant gratification. Joyce, on the other hand, understands the value of waiting for the right moment. Robert had understood our daughter better than I had thought. He had seen her impulsive nature, her need to have everything immediately, and he had used that weakness against her. The next day I decided to take a little trip into town. I hadn't left the property for weeks except for essentials, but now I was curious to see how Amanda was handling her new wealth. I found her in the most expensive clothing store in town, trying on a coat that probably cost more than what I had spent on clothes in the last 5 years. "What do you think of this one?" she asked the saleswoman, twirling in front of the mirror. "It's for my trip to Paris next month." "It looks beautiful on you, Mrs. Matthews," the saleswoman replied, "and we have shoes that are a perfect match." From my position behind a rack of scarves, I could watch Amanda without being seen. Her behavior was telling. She was buying compulsively, choosing the most expensive items without even asking the price. It was as if she was trying to compensate for something, as if money could fill a void she didn't even know she had. When she left the store with 3 large bags, I followed her at a discreet distance. Her next stop was the travel agency, where she spent over an hour planning what seemed to be a very extravagant vacation. After that, she went to a real estate agent's office. Through the window, I could see her looking at brochures for houses that were clearly out of her reach, even with her inheritance. It was fascinating and sad at the same time. Amanda was acting exactly like someone who had won the lottery and had no idea how to manage sudden wealth. She was making impulsive decisions that would lead her to financial ruin in just a few years. That night back in my cabin, I did some basic calculations. Based on what I had observed and heard, Amanda was spending approximately $50,000 a month. At that rate, her $6 million would last less than 10 years, and that wasn't even counting the interest she was likely accumulating on loans. Robert had been right. Amanda didn't have the discipline or the wisdom to handle true wealth. But I did. As the candles flickered around me and the forest whispered in the darkness outside, I made a decision. It was time to start turning my mineral rights into a reality. But I would do it my way on my terms, and when the time was perfect. Amanda would get her surprise, but first she would have her fall. 6 months after moving into the cabin, my life had changed in ways I could have never imagined. I had sold the mineral rights to the most reliable mining company for $12 million after a careful negotiation that also secured me future royalties. But I kept my life simple, at least on the surface. I continued to live in the cabin, although now I had electricity and running water discreetly installed. From the outside, the place still looked run down exactly as Amanda expected it to be. But inside, I had made subtle but significant improvements for my comfort. My lawyer, Mr. Peterson, had structured everything so that the money was completely protected and diversified. I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, and much more. But more important than the money was the sense of control I had regained over my own existence. Meanwhile, I had been watching the predictable progression of Amanda's life. My sources of information in town had become more reliable as people started to view me with sympathy. The poor old woman abandoned by her cruel daughter. What I heard was exactly what I had expected, but still the speed of Amanda's downfall surprised me. She sold 2 of the 3 cars she bought. Mrs. Gonzalez informed me during one of our casual encounters at the supermarket, and she canceled that trip to Europe she had planned. "Really?" I asked, feigning surprise. "My sister-in-law works at the bank. She says Amanda has been there almost every day trying to get more loans. Apparently she already owes over $200,000. $200,000 in debt in just 6 months. Amanda's pace of self-destruction was even faster than I had calculated, but what really confirmed that her world was falling apart was when I saw her at the pharmacy one Tuesday afternoon. She looked different. Her hair, which she had always kept perfectly styled, was unkempt. Her clothes, though still expensive, looked wrinkled. But the most telling thing was her eyes. They had the desperate look of someone who was finally realizing the consequences of her actions. She was buying anxiety medication and sleeping pills, speaking in a low but urgent voice to the pharmacist about whether her insurance would cover the cost. That night, as I was eating dinner in my now comfortable cabin, I received the call I had been waiting for. "Mom?" Amanda's voice sounded small, vulnerable, in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child. "Hello, Amanda." "Mom, I need to talk to you. Can I come see you?" I looked out the window into the darkness of the forest, feeling a strange calm. "Of course." "When?" "Now. It's urgent." "All right. You know where to find me." An hour later, I heard the familiar sound of her car approaching down the dirt path. But when I stepped out onto the porch, I saw it was no longer the bright red BMW. It was a used sedan, probably 10 years old. Amanda got out of the car slowly, as if every movement cost her an effort. When she came into the porch light, I could see she had been crying. "Mom," her voice began breaking, "I've made terrible mistakes." I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there watching her, remembering all the times she had come to me with problems when she was younger, and how those visits had stopped completely when she got married and decided she no longer needed me. "Do you want to come in?" I finally asked. She nodded, and I led her inside the cabin. I had made tea, as if I had known this conversation was coming. Amanda sat in the chair I had set out for visitors, looking around with eyes that seemed to be seeing the place for the first time. "It's not as bad as I thought," she muttered. "You've made improvements." "I've done what I can." She was silent for a long moment, wringing her hands in her lap. Finally, she looked up at me. "Mom, I'm in trouble. Serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Money. I owe a lot of money. More than I can pay back." "How much?" $400,000. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I thought I had more time. I thought Dad's money would last forever. But I made stupid investments. I bought things I didn't need. I spent without thinking." I looked at her. This woman who had been my baby, my little girl, and who had turned into someone I barely recognized. But now, sitting in my humble cabin, stripped of all her previous arrogance, I could see a glimmer of the girl she used to be. "And what do you want me to do?" I asked gently. "I need your help, Mom. I know I don't deserve it. I know I was horrible to you, but you're the only family I have left." Tears started to stream down her cheeks, and for a moment my heart softened. This was my daughter after all, the child I had raised, who I had loved unconditionally, no matter how much pain she had caused me. "Amanda," I said calmly, "6 months ago you told me to go live with the pigs. You called me a poor old woman, you humiliated me in front of your dead father, and you kicked me out of the only home I had ever known." "I know, Mom. I know, and I'm so sorry. You took my family pictures, my clothes, even my mother's china set. You said I had never contributed anything, that I had always been a burden." Every word I said was like a slap to her. I could see it on her face, the way she flinched with each reminder of her cruelty. "And now," I continued, "you come here to this cabin you considered beneath you, asking me for help. Tell me, Amanda, what's changed? Am I suddenly a good mother because you need money?" "No, Mom, it's not that. I've realized what I did. I've had time to think, to see how I treated the one person who always loved me unconditionally." Her words sounded sincere, and a part of me wanted to believe them. But another part, the part that had suffered in silence for months, that had been humiliated and abandoned, remembered the pain all too well. "Do you know what I've learned living here, Amanda?" I asked. "I've learned that I can survive without you. I've learned that I don't need anyone's approval to have worth. I've learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who deserve it the least." "Mom, please, I'll pay you back. When I sort out my financial problems, I'll pay back everything you lend me with interest." With what money will you pay me back, Amanda? From what I've heard, you've spent almost your entire inheritance. What makes you think you'll be able to pay back debts of $400,000? She fell silent because we both knew she had no answer. I got up and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. For months, I had imagined this moment. I had fantasized about the day Amanda would come crawling back begging for my help. In my fantasies, I had been harsh, merciless, giving her a taste of her own medicine. But now that she was here, seeing her truly broken and desperate, my feelings were more complicated than I had expected. "Mom," her voice was pleading now. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but if I don't get this money, I'm going to lose everything. The house, my law practice, everything." I turned to face her. "And why should I care about that, Amanda? When you had everything and I had nothing, did you care about my well-being?" "No," she whispered, "and I hate myself for it." The moment of truth had arrived. The moment when I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. I could be like Amanda had been to me, cruel, merciless, without compassion. Or I could be the person Robert had seen in me, strong but also capable of mercy when it was deserved. "Amanda," I said finally, "I'm going to make you an offer, a single offer." Her eyes lit up with desperate hope. "I will help you with your debts, but not as a gift, as a loan with very specific terms. Anything, Mom." "I'll accept any terms." I smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "You haven't heard the terms yet." I sat across from Amanda, watching her await my terms with a mix of hope and terror in her eyes. For months I had imagined this moment, and now that it was here, I felt a deep calm I hadn't experienced in years. "These are my terms." I began, my voice firm and clear. "I will lend you $500,000 to cover your debts and give you a small cushion to start over." "Mom, that's more than I expected." I held up a hand to silence her. "I'm not finished. The loan will be at 5% annual interest, to be paid back in 10 years. That's more generous than any bank." She nodded eagerly. "I accept. Of course I accept. But there are more conditions. For the next 5 years, you will work for me. You will come here every Saturday and help me with property maintenance, cleaning, whatever I need. No complaints, no excuses." I saw her face change slightly, but she nodded. "Okay. And every time you come, you will speak to me with respect. None of the snide or condescending remarks I got used to. You will treat me like the mother I always was, not the burden you decided I was." "Yes, Mom." "Finally," I said, getting up and walking to my desk, "I want you to write a letter of full apology for everything you did to me, not for me, but for your own growth. And I want you to read it aloud to the entire family at the next Christmas gathering." Amanda turned pale. "Mom, that's humiliating." "Humiliating?" I looked her straight in the eye. "You find it humiliating to have to apologize for humiliating your own mother, for kicking me out of my home and spreading lies about me to the whole family." She looked down, ashamed. "No, you're right. I'll do it." "Good. Then we have a deal." The next day I transferred the money to her account. Seeing her relief when she could pay her debts gave me a strange satisfaction, not because I enjoyed helping her, but because I had taken complete control of the situation. The first Saturday she came to work, she arrived dressed in jeans and an old t-shirt, something I hadn't seen her wear in years. Without her expensive clothes and arrogant attitude, she looked more like the daughter I remembered from decades ago. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her tone respectful for the first time in years. "I need you to help me clean out the back shed. I'm reorganizing some things." We worked in silence for the first hour. I could see she was struggling with the manual labor, her soft hands unaccustomed to physical work, but she didn't complain. "Mom," she said finally, as we moved some old boxes, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you get the money to lend me? I don't understand how you could have saved so much being poor." I finished for her. She blushed. "I didn't mean it like that." I smiled, but it wasn't a cruel smile this time. "Amanda, there are a lot of things about me you never knew, a lot of things you never bothered to ask." That afternoon after she left, I sat on my renovated porch sipping tea and looking out at the forest that I now knew held my fortune. The trees whispered in the late breeze, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. The following months established a routine. Amanda came every Saturday, worked without complaint, and gradually we began to have real conversations. Not the superficial interactions of years past, but honest talks about life, about mistakes, about what really mattered. One autumn Saturday while we were raking leaves, she surprised me with a direct question. "Will you ever really forgive me, Mom?" I stopped leaning on my rake. Amanda, forgiveness isn't something I grant or withhold like a prize. It's something that happens naturally when I see real change. And have you seen it, real change? I looked at her, this 40-year-old woman who had rediscovered humility the hard way. Yes, I have. But more importantly, I think you've seen it in yourself. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I'm so ashamed of the person I was. Don't be ashamed of the past, Amanda. Use it to be better in the future. Christmas arrived, and with it the first family gathering since my exile. Amanda had kept her promise and wrote a full letter apologizing not only to me, but to the entire family for the lies she had spread about me. When she read it aloud in my sister Linda's living room with the whole family present, the silence was absolute. I could see tears in the eyes of several relatives who had believed her stories and turned their backs on me. Mom, Amanda finished, looking directly at me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day I can earn it. After dinner, Linda approached me, her eyes full of regret. Joyce, I can't believe we were so gullible. We should have known better. People believe what they want to believe, I answered simply. But the important thing is that now they know the truth. That spring, exactly 1 year after finding the key in the cabin, I made a major decision. The time had come to reveal my true situation, but I would do it my way. I bought a beautiful house in the hills overlooking the valley where I had grown up. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was elegant, comfortable, and completely mine. When Amanda arrived for her usual Saturday of work and found the cabin empty with a note directing her to my new address, her shock was complete. Mom, she said when she arrived at my new house, what is all this? It's my home, I replied simply. My real home. But how? The money you lent me? Your financial situation. I smiled, inviting her into the spacious kitchen where I had made tea. Amanda, do you remember the cabin you thought was worthless? Yes. It turns out your father knew something that neither you nor I knew at first. That land held very valuable mineral rights. Very valuable. I watched her process this information, her expression changing from confusion to understanding, and then to something I can only describe as awe mixed with respect. You mean Dad knew? Your father knew exactly what he was doing. He knew you would squander the liquid cash, but that I would have the patience and wisdom to uncover the real treasure he had left me. Amanda was silent for a long time. Finally, she looked up at me. So you never needed my money. You could have just let me suffer the consequences of my actions. Yes, I could have. Why didn't you? I walked over to her and placed my hand on hers. Because despite everything that happened, you are still my daughter. And because I believed that the person you used to be still existed somewhere inside of you. Tears began to fall down her cheeks. I don't deserve it. Maybe not, I said softly. But a mother's love isn't always based on what's deserved. That summer, Amanda finished paying off her loan 3 years ahead of schedule. She had rebuilt her law practice with a completely different focus, specializing in helping families in financial crisis. She said it was her way of giving back. Mom, she said to me one Saturday as we worked together in my new garden, do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dad had just split everything evenly from the start? I thought about her question as I planted roses by the entryway path. I think your father knew us better than we knew ourselves, I finally replied. He knew I needed to learn that I could survive on my own, and he knew you needed to learn that money without wisdom is worthless. And do you think we learned? I looked at my daughter, no longer the arrogant, cruel woman she had been, but someone who had discovered humility and gratitude the hard way. I thought about my own journey from the devastated woman who had been kicked out of her home to the independent and prosperous woman I was now. "Yes," I said, smiling as the afternoon sun bathed my garden in golden light. "I think we finally learned." That night, as I sat on my terrace, watching the lights of the valley below, I reflected on the extraordinary year that had passed. I had lost a family that took me for granted, and had gained the respect of a daughter who had learned to value me. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Amanda. "Mom, I just wanted to say goodnight and thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing something in me that I couldn't see." After I hung up, I sat in the stillness of the night, feeling more whole than I had felt in years. Robert had been right. I was stronger than anyone had ever thought, including myself. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't getting what you want, but discovering you already had everything you needed to be happy.